Hello everybody and welcome to Friends of the Court. Today we're going to be presenting our series Law Made Simple with attorney George Bassias, who works in New York State. He is a specialist in personal injury, workers' compensation, and also individual bankruptcy in Chapter 7s. George, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here.
Super. And hopefully our learners, our viewers are going to learn a lot of important things that will help them. Today we're talking about personal injury and automobile accidents. What happens when you're in an automobile accident? Now, you've handled these kind of cases.
I've been doing automobile accidents for almost 30 years. I would say it's probably the favorite part of my law practice.
Yeah.
Because it's always cut and dry to a certain degree. But since we're making law made simple, any question that you're going to ask me, I'm going to answer it from the perspective of an individual that gets into an accident and doesn't yet have a lawyer, or chooses not to be represented by a lawyer.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Somebody has a serious car accident. For example, they might have been rear-ended at an intersection and the car is smashed up. Do they stay in the car or get out? And there's some considerations. The car might blow up, but they might have a difficulty getting out of the car. What should they do right after an accident?
Okay, so if you think the car is going to blow up, get out of the car. Whether you have to crawl out or whatever, get out of the car. But that's an unusual circumstance. In most cases, people are pretty confident that the car is not going to blow up. And in that particular case, from the perspective of making a claim for personal injury against another vehicle, it's better, as a general rule, to stay in the car.
Okay, all right. Until the police arrive?
Until the police arrive. If you have your cell phone, call the police. If you feel that you're injured, call the police. If you're in an accident, call the police. Wait for the police. If you feel you need medical attention, the police will ask you that, and the ambulance may arrive before the police arrives.
So somebody's had a serious car accident, they are injured, an ambulance arrives, takes them to the hospital, and some treatment starts. After they visit the hospital, or while they're at the hospital, do they contact their insurance company first or an attorney?
Now, that is a little bit of a trick question. If there's any question as to liability and any question as to how serious you're injured, I would say call the lawyer first. But if it's clearly the fault of the other car and you're clearly seriously injured, it's okay to call the insurance company first. Because the problem is, in a deposition, if you called your lawyer first, there are some slick lawyers that will ask you, who did you call first, your lawyer or your insurance company? And then it makes it look like the lawyer's guiding you to make the claim. So in that sense, it would be better if you called the insurance company. But if there's any question as to liability and any question as to how serious your injury is, call your lawyer first.
Okay. And okay, so somebody contacts their insurance company, and in the case of one individual I know, the insurance company told him to keep his receipts for taxis, for cabs, for Uber rides. How long does that last? Because your car's been damaged, you don't have a car. The insurance company says to keep your receipts for rides, but how long can that go on?
Okay, so when you're in a car accident, generally there's two insurance companies involved in the case. One is your own insurance company, which is no-fault benefits. It's responsible for paying the doctor. It's responsible for paying your lost wages up to 80% of your lost wages, subject to a limit of $2,000 generally. And if you choose, when you buy your insurance, if you choose to pay for rental car, they generally give you about $25 to $30 for rent a car, and it usually lasts about 30 days. Now, the problem is that most people, when they get car insurance, they look for the cheapest insurance possible. They're looking to save money. They'll check around. Allstate will charge me so much. Progressive will charge me so much. Hartford will charge me so much, and they get the cheapest insurance, and they get the lowest amount of liability coverage, they get the lowest amount. You can buy extra no fault. You can buy everything extra, but you have to pay a little bit more money. Now, I mentioned that there's two types of insurance. The other person's vehicle is responsible for liability. They will not pay initially your medical bills, your lost wages, your rental car. But what happens is at the conclusion of the case, you mentioned keeping receipts. As you keep your receipts, these make up your damages. So while your insurance company may not have coverage for that, or you may be out of pocket with certain expenses, at the end of the case, you can add those to your special damages.
Right. So I've just had an epiphany that getting the cheapest insurance, which often people just automatically by default do, is not necessarily what everyone really wants if they consider what we're talking about.
Very bad idea. I'll give you an example. You get into a car accident, you have minimal coverage, which is $25,000 per person, $50,000 maximum. And you get involved in a motor vehicle accident with a car that has an equal amount of insurance or no insurance at all. And you have a very serious injury that requires surgery, possibly hospitalization for a long period of time. You exhaust the coverage of your no fault, which generally is $50,000. Like I said, you can buy more. You can have $100,000 in medical coverage. You can have $150,000 in medical coverage. Another thing, if you have a high amount of liability, every policy of insurance has something called supplemental underinsurance motorist coverage, or as we call SUM. For example, I have $1 million coverage, and I'm not encouraging anybody to follow me and get into a car accident with me, but I have $1 million liability coverage, and I have approximately $1 million in SUM coverage, which means that if I get into an accident, or anybody that's driving my car with my permission gets into an accident with a vehicle that is uninsured, I can claim $1 million liability coverage from my own insurance. I would tell anybody that's watching this program, call your broker, increase your SUM coverage, if nothing else. Because if you get into a serious accident and you have a serious injury and the other car has minimal policy, you're SOL. And I won't tell you what SOL means.
Right. Got it.
Something out of luck.
Yeah. Right. Geez, that is a mind opener. When people are given rental cars, generally, how long do they get that rental car after their vehicle's been damaged?
It should be for 30 days.
Okay.
So, every general policy has about a 30-day period. I'm not sure if you could buy more rental car under your policy. Usually, the way the insurance policy is designed is to allow people about 30 days to fix the car or to get paid for the car.
In these kind of cases, when you've had an accident and you've done some treatment, when do checks start coming back to the damaged party?
Okay, so first of all, when a person calls the insurance company will send the individual a no-fault application. And now we're talking about the state of New York, because state of New York is a no-fault area.
Can you explain what that means?
No fault means that regardless of who's at fault at the accident, every motor vehicle carries $50,000 in medical and lost wage coverage combined, total of $50,000. Doesn't matter who's at fault, you automatically get to claim that when you're in an accident. Even if you were rear-ended, you're still entitled to no fault for the car that you're a passenger in, unless if you're a pedestrian. Then as a pedestrian, you would get no fault from the car that hit you. So that's what no fault is. So repeat the question, I forgot.
Yeah, I was wondering, was it the question of how long before checks come in?
Okay. It depends on how long. Once you file the no-fault application, in the no-fault application, it asks you if you're out of work due to the accident. And when you say yes and you provide the name and address of your employer and the phone number of your employer, it is then the obligation of the claims representative to send a wage verification form to your employer. They usually do it pretty quickly, within a week. Then once they get it back, you as the injured party have to get a note from your doctor, and this note has to be updated every month or every doctor's visit, that basically says, Ian Carpenter is under my care for personal injury that he sustained as a result of a motor vehicle accident on October 3rd, and say, for example, today is October 19th. He is totally disabled to date. You take that note and you give it to the insurance company. When the insurance company has that note and the employer's wage verification, they will start paying lost wages. But in order for you to keep getting them, after October 19th, you have to get a new note from your doctor. And they will keep paying until you have what they call an independent medical exam, which usually, unless if you have very serious injuries, the insurance company's doctor will say, you're no longer disabled, we will no longer pay for medical treatment, physical therapy, lost wages. They'll just give you a flat out denial.
Wow. So let's take the example. Somebody living in Queens or Brooklyn or New Jersey, they have an accident, they get a rental car for a month, but they still are injured after that 1 month period. I think they're allowed to claim, is it $25 or something for taxi rides to and from medical visits?
Yeah, but not necessarily to and from medical visits. Unfortunately, no fault does not work like workers' compensation. If it was a workers' compensation claim, they keep their receipts and whatever they're out of pocket going to and from the doctor, anything they spend out of pocket, they will get reimbursed. With no fault, there's a limit. It's $25, $30 a month total.
That's not very much.
No, it's not very much. But like I said, there are options on purchasing more. This is with a minimal policy.
Right.
No fault doesn't work effectively long-term unless if it's a very serious injury. If it's a soft tissue injury where there's no apparent broken bones, then no fault does not operate very well, because the purpose of the insurance company is to set up an independent medical exam as soon as they know which doctors you're treating with and cut you off. In workers' compensation, there is no limit to out-of-pocket expenses. Whatever your out-of-pocket expenses are, keep your receipts. There's a form you fill out every time you go to a hearing, or even before a hearing. You can submit it to the claims rep and you'll get reimbursed.
Suppose somebody has had a serious accident, but nothing shows up on the MRI. Nothing shows up in x-rays, but they have dizziness or blurred vision, loss of sleep. How can they prove that?
Okay, I'm going to tell you some legal mumbo jumbo that's hard to understand, and then I'm going to simplify it. In New York State, in order to be successful in a personal injury action resulting from a motor vehicle accident, you have to have a serious injury. And a serious injury is defined as death, dismemberment, fracture, serious and significant loss of use of a body member, system, and function, and the inability to do one's usual and customary things for the first 90 out of the first 180 days out of the accident. So there's been a lot of litigation. There was a point in time in this profession, I remember about 20 years ago, if you showed, maybe 25 years ago, if you showed an MRI with a herniated disc, that was big money. If you showed an MRI with a tear in your shoulder or your knee, that was big money automatically. Things are changing now. The insurance companies have spent a lot of money to educate people and convince people that you may have a herniated disc through a natural process. It may not be from this accident. You might have a tear in your shoulder, a tear in your knee. You may have already had it. Not necessarily. So an MRI showing is not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing sometimes.
Wow.
Now, what's looked at very importantly is range of motion. If your doctor after 3 months says that you still have a significant loss of range of motion in your neck, in your back, in your shoulder, in your legs, or even what you mentioned, dizziness. Dizziness is a significant thing. If you have a doctor that after 3 months is saying you're still having dizzy spells, you're high risk for falling, it's a significant dizzy spell, that I believe any judge would rule in favor against the summary judgment motion, stating that it is a significant injury, that it does satisfy the threshold rule. So, MRI findings, X-ray findings are not dispositive at all times. Yeah. It's how the person feels, and it's evident in how they're living their life.
Yeah. We want to keep this keep this program simple so that people can learn practical information. But isn't it true that after having a serious accident, some people might be afraid of getting in a car again?
That's true. New York State generally does not compensate for psychiatric injuries or psychological injuries unless they're accompanied with a physical injury. So if somebody got in an accident and they walked away unhurt and they got no treatment, but now they're going to a psychiatrist claiming they're afraid to drive, that will be a difficult claim for some reason. That's how it generally is. But if they're treating for neck and back and they're depressed and they're afraid to drive, then it might be a time to see a psychiatrist, and that would bolster the claim.
Uh-huh. And maybe you might be able to answer the question in COVID time, but also without COVID. What kind of timeline in New York State or in the New York City metropolitan area, what kind of timeline do people go through after they've had an accident, they've filed their claim with the insurance company, and perhaps have to go to court if there's disputes?
So nobody generally settles a case before a 6-month period unless if you have a very serious injury like a fracture and a minimal policy. If you have a fracture and a minimal policy, the insurance company is going to offer the money right away. But if it's a soft tissue case, the case has to be developed in the sense that the person has to get the treatment, has to get the tests, has to get the medical records. I would say generally at least 6 months. At 6 months, an attorney would evaluate the case, send the settlement package to the insurance company, and I'm talking about a soft tissue injury case. And if the insurance company doesn't seem to offer the type of money that the attorney thinks that it's worth, then the lawyer will file a lawsuit.
Yeah. And do scars, for example, if people glass or twisted metal gives somebody a scar, is that considered soft tissue, or is that something more than that?
That's a facial disfigurement, which is a permanent injury. Uh-huh. So I wouldn't consider that questionable as to whether, I don't believe an insurance company would get that case dismissed arguing that it's not a serious injury because it's a permanent injury.
Right.
Scars are worth money. I've done cases where I've gone to the insurance company's office and we did scar reviews. Uh-huh. Even before filing a lawsuit. I recently did one. Actually, I filed a lawsuit on that. It was a dog bite case. And I went to the insurance company, and I think we wound up settling it it was over $80,000. I don't remember. It was a couple of years ago, but all from a scar review. The insurance company takes pictures of the scar. They get to see firsthand. This was a young lady, and they see firsthand the scars, and they offer you money. It's called a scar review.
It is?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Here's something that I wondered. Now, I've seen in the newspaper, sometimes somebody has a claim that's in the court or with insurance companies. Do insurance companies or opposing attorneys ever have a photographer go to a person's home to catch them maybe lifting something heavy or walking without a cane? Do they really go to those lengths to see whether somebody is injured the way they have said they are?
if there's a lot at stake, if you're making a big claim, if it's more than a minimal policy, they generally do that. And they do it a lot in workers' comp cases, a lot.
Wow.
And but personal injury also. I'm never surprised to get that videotape sent in the mail.
Right.
And I always advise my people, get off of social media. If you're making a claim for personal injury, get off of social media and be careful, because if it's a serious claim, you will get videotaped.
Uh-huh. And if they have that videotape, that could mean the claim is out the window or greatly reduced?
It could hurt it, especially where you're claiming you can't walk anymore, you can only walk half a block, you can't lift more than 10 pounds, and they see you carrying furniture, and they see you. I actually had a workers' comp case where my client, they took a video of him jogging, and he was claiming to be totally disabled, problem with his knees, and they had him upstate somewhere jogging. Somehow I rehabilitated that case, and I wound up getting him a really big settlement.
Yeah.
But that was unusual. It was unusual, because most of the time the other lawyer will take a hardline approach saying your client has a fraudulent claim.
Got it. Jeez. And what, can you give us, just before we wrap up, could you give us an idea of when the legal system in New York State really works for an injured party and where sometimes it fails them?
Okay, so most plaintiffs' lawyers will pick a jury for their case. And I've always had the idea, the theory, that maybe a jury is not appropriate at all times. Because when it comes to soft tissue injury cases, sometimes juries don't take them seriously. And a judge would be in a better position to understand it. For example, the rule is that if you've lost at least 3 months from work, you qualify as a serious injury. A jury would not know that, and they would not understand that. They would just say, oh, this person has a neck and a back pain, and they played the system and they stayed out of work. And if the jury does not like your client, they'll rule against you. Whereas I find the judges, as long as you meet that minimum threshold, they'll usually rule in your favor if you choose with your client to do an arbitration, which is in front of a judge and not a jury. So juries are great when it's a really big accident and there's really good injuries. They're not necessarily so good in soft tissue cases.
Yeah, and could you remind us again, what classifies as the soft tissue injuries?
Soft tissue injuries, when you walk away, there's no broken bones. You're complaining you got a pain in your neck, pain in your back, and you got to go through the medical treatment to try to determine what the problem is.
Wow. And so I guess that sort of covers it. The system could really work in someone's favor with a serious injury to have a trial by jury, and as you explained it, to avoid that with a soft tissue injury.
And really quickly, before the show started, you asked me a question: if somebody gets sued, what to do in that scenario?
Yeah.
Do they need to hire a lawyer? And the answer to that is no. If you have car insurance, your car insurance will assign a lawyer to you free of charge. So that individual that's watching this program that just got sued for a car accident, make sure you get the summons and complaint to your insurance company.
Right. Anything else to add on this?
No, that's about it.
Thank you very much, George. We hope you'll be back on our program. This is Friends of the Court, keeping law simple. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Super. Don't forget to subscribe to our program. We're on YouTube and also on LiveOne.tv.